email about how we can change our email addresses.
I did. It's a pretty complicated thing though, but there's a guide on how to do it.
Okay, I had like half remembered seeing that, but then couldn't find it when I looked for it the other day. I'll look more.
Yeah, I actually don't even remember how I did it. I did do it. Now, if you need help, I'll show you what to do.
Not a priority right now, but was just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Is Bob okay? Looks like he's been trying to connect to the audio for a couple minutes now. Oh, never mind. Here he is. Father John.
Hey.
Great to see you.
Hello, everybody. Sorry I'm late.
All right. Not a problem. Thanks for joining us. You're actually right on time. And with that, since we have our full board, I'm going to go ahead and get started. We can call the meeting to order at 6 p.m. I'd like to announce that this meeting is being recorded. And Jonathan, can you call the roll?
Yeah. Nope. Am I on mute? Director Brandt?
Here.
Director Geis?
Here.
Director Bertrand?
Here.
Director Freeman?
Here.
Director Hedges?
Here.
Director Nguyen?
Here.
Director Thurlow?
Here.
All right. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the Chumash people who are the traditional custodians of this land. We pay our respects to the Chumash elders, past, present, and future, who call this place Anaskoyo, the land that Isla Vista sits upon, their home. We are proud to continue their tradition of coming together and growing as a community. We thank the Chumash community for their stewardship and support, and we look forward to strengthening our ties as we continue our relationship of mutual respect and understanding. With that, we'll move to the consent agenda. Are there any items that directors would like to pull?
Spencer,
Go ahead, George.
can we take a moment of silence to reflect on the legacy and the importance of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, one of the great jurisprudence giants of our modern day?
Yes, we can, George. Thank you for bringing that. We can.
Thank you. Thank you.
Silence now. Okay. Thank you for that, George.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving into the consent agenda, are there any items that directors would like to pull? All right. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll
I'll
second.
second.
All right. I've got a motion by Thurlow and a second by Geis. Is there any public comment? All right. We'll go to a roll call vote.
Well, Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director Freeman?
Yes.
Director Bertrand?
Yes.
Director Hedges?
Yes.
Thurlow?
Yes.
Geis?
Yes.
Nguyen?
Yes.
All right. Motion carries 7-0. And with that, we'll move into the public comment period. So this is the time for any member of the public to speak on any matter that is not currently on the agenda. So we will not take any action on any item that's not on the agenda except as provided for by law. Are there any requests to speak on items not on the agenda? All right. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment period and we'll move to item 4.1. This is the police brutality and anti-racism work group update. Jonathan, do you have any updates that you'd like to share?
Yeah, so we do have one update that would also be good to get some feedback on before we bring it to the board. It's the data item. So we've gotten the data from Lieutenant Camarena, and it's everything we requested that is available was given to us. It is a huge amount of information, though, thousands of arrests and citations. So it's taking some time to go through and do the initial simple analysis, and then it would take more to do something more substantive. But what I'm doing right now for this project is we had the 4 years, so 18, 19, 20, and 2013 as the one in the past to look at, and the info we got for each year was race, sex, date of birth, employer or school, arrest, location, the involvement of the officer, the charge, the date, and the time. So what a simple, piece of data analysis that we can do that will be the first thing we bring to the board would be, by year, we just break down the data by each of these categories and show them. So for race in 2013, for example, is, white was 62.8%, Black was 55.3%, Latino was 16%, for example. So it'd be graphs like that. And that's pretty simple, though. But is there anything that the board is looking at for that discussion? Is the simple good first, and then we can think of more complicated ways to look at the data? Or do we want to wait longer for it to come to the board, but it'll be a more, finalized final copy of a analysis of this? What's the feedback, or what's the thought on what you want for this one?
Jonathan, in this high-level overview, are you also thinking of including change over time, since we have the multiple years to compare?
Okay, change over time. Yeah, I can put that in. That's probably an easier one to do first.
Okay. And I know you'd mentioned the racial makeup. You'd mentioned the different types of citations. What are the other categories? It was, I think you said, if there was a school they're affiliated with.
Yeah. So yeah, it's race, sex, age, employer or school. So we do have some employer data in there too. Arrest location, so the address, the involvement of the officer. So is that a citation or arrest? Then the charge, and there's a lot of different charges, but a few that are the most prevalent. And then the arrest date, and then the time.
Great. Okay. And so when you're talking about putting together like a data visualization, you're saying we can sort of break down how they change over time for all of those different data points.
Okay. That could be all the data points for each year plus change over time for the first round of report, and then we can go from there. There's more.
Okay. That's great. And I saw, George, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about a location, because I think that's important, but you got it. It seems to me that the incredible value of this is going to be cross-tabbing. And cross-tabbing, I would think, with this size of a database is going to be it is going to be a huge task. So I mean, you want to cross-tab race with crime. You want to cross-tab location with crime. You want to cross-tab, Is there any way, Jonathan, I mean, would you feel at all comfortable in us trying to find somebody at UCSB in the social department, or who might be interested in looking at this data, entering it into a database, and then giving us those crosstabs? Because I think that's going to be really, unless you feel like the way you're actually entering it into your database, you're going to be able to crosstab.
Yeah, so I think that would be great. If you could help me connect with someone. I have some thoughts of who it could be, but please let me know, because my skills are really elementary in this. Like I can do some crosstabs a little bit, but maybe not that much, or maybe not correctly. And so I'm using just Google Sheets and Excel to do the data analysis, which can give the simple stuff, like what Spencer just requested, like the basic data and change over time. But if we want to do anything more complicated, I think I'll need help from a professional.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of people who are interested in this kind of thing and are local.
Absolutely. But I don't think that should delay your initial report.
Right. I'll
But
do the initial one, and then we can work on something else over the
great.
quarter.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that, George. I'll go to Director Bertrand.
Thank you. George, I think that's a fantastic suggestion. And building on that, there are a number of courses taught at UCSB, especially in the Black Studies department and other departments that really discuss these issues of racial equity in the criminal justice system. And I think this could also be a great way to engage with many of our constituents who are students when we're further down the road with this, such as when we have the data and we want to share it with the community. I think there's a great opportunity to work with professors and other academics that find this to be interesting.
Yes, I put in my notes on here that a good next step is to make the data open and available for people who want to use it and figure things out with it that we might not have. So that's a great point.
That's a great idea.
Yes, I 100% agree. And I think there's so many people in our community that would be able to make a great use of that open source data. And it's definitely, not to toot our own horn, but something that I think government struggles with a lot is being open with some of its data. And so I'm happy we're taking that approach. Any other feedback or discussion from the board? Ethan.
One thing I'll just mention, not on this specific project, but particular to this agenda item, looking at the name of the work group, Police Brutality and Anti-Racism, I know that it was numerous horrific incidents of police brutality that really caught the attention of our nation and launched this 2020 movement for racial justice. But as I look at the work that we're continuing to do, I know a lot of it is not directly related to police brutality. So just a suggestion, if we want to change the name of this work group update, just since it is going to be on our agenda for a while, and just so that members of the public know what we are discussing, if we want to change it to something maybe of racial justice, or leave just anti-racism and public safety, policing equity, something other than police brutality and anti-racism, I think that might help more accurately reflect what these discussions are about on our agenda going forward.
I'll second a motion if you make one, Ethan.
Sure. Jonathan, do you need a motion for that?
I think the board did vote to name this work group this, so we probably want to vote to change the name.
Okay. Looks like Jay has his hand up.
Oh, Jay, go ahead.
Is this really even an agenda item that is an update from that working group? I mean, I'm on that working group, and we're not. I mean, I'm not being invited to meetings if we are meetings. So, I mean, in some sense, it's just an update from staff and from people who are involved in the process, right? Like it's not like a formal working group agenda item anyway.
Yeah,
Well,
I send you all the things I'm going to bring up in this update over email. Like I told you everything about this data that I just pretty much repeated verbatim.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that like I'm being left. I mean, I'm not like complaining about I'm being left out or anything. I'm just pointing out that, like, this agenda item feels more like an update from Jonathan that we're kept in the loop on, as opposed to that it's the working group that is providing it. So I could see that we might be able to change the name of this agenda item without it being a formal change of the working group's agenda or title, because it's in some sense not. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, my comment on that would be that I think a lot of these items that Jonathan's bringing back are based on the list of tasks that the work group put together at first. So now we came up with that list, and Jonathan and Deborah are bringing back the items over the next couple of months. So I think the work group part is still relevant, but I guess I'll make a motion to rename the police brutality and anti-racism work group to be the racial justice and public safety work group.
All right.
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion from Bertrand and seconded by Thurlow. Is there any other board discussion on this? Okay. Is there any public comment on this motion? All right. With that, we'll go to roll call vote.
Director Brandt,
Yes.
Freeman,
Was that Freeman you said?
Yeah.
No.
Bertrand,
Yes.
Hedges,
Yes.
Thurlow,
Yes.
Geis,
Yes.
Nguyen.
Yes.
All right. Motion passes. So with that, now sort of just back to the discussion. I don't know if there's any other updates. I think there's one other update that's actually agendized, so we won't need to speak about it in this agenda. Is that right? Or is there
Yes.
anything else you wanted to report back on?
No, the other two are Halloween and investigator.
Right. Okay, then with that, I still think this is helpful to have the schedule always on here. So thanks for sharing that. And I think we can move on to our next item, which is let's go straight actually to item 4.3 in the same vein, which is the contract with UCPD for the interpersonal violence investigator.
Great. So after many months, I think of discussing.
Jonathan, can you excuse me from this? Is this the UCSB contract?
I got you. I'll put you in the waiting room. Great. So after many months of discussing this contract and trying to negotiate something that falls in line with the board's resolution 20-9, we did come to a successful negotiation at this point. So this contract is recommended, or this contract amendment is recommended for approval. And the piece we figured out finally at the end, which, like we said last time, was close to getting figured out, is now in there. And I'll just read the sentence that is now new inserted in here, which is related to the outreach commitments of the investigator. And it says, these presentations will involve groups attentive to racial equity and the fair treatment of all races, with the intent of providing equal reporting opportunities and outcomes to all. So we got, both of what agencies wanted with the, opportunities and outcomes for all, along with the racial equity. We got them both in. So it's recommended for approval. It extends this contract through June of 2021. And then it gives us more time to continue the negotiation.
Excellent. Well, thanks for that update, Jonathan. I'll just share that I'm very happy with the language that we were able to come up with. And I continue to be a big supporter of this program and to Kavina for all the work that she's doing to try and support survivors during this really difficult time. And so I'm very excited that we've come to a good place on this. Director Bertrand, I think you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I echo your comments, Spencer. This program has really been meaningful for our community. I'm always reminded of where this came from, which was demands from students, especially students against sexual assault, and numerous survivors in our community who bravely came forward in an effort to make our community safer for all. So I really appreciate that. And I'm glad to see the first implementation of a recommendation from our anti-racism work, which was to have racial equity provisions in our law enforcement contracts. So I'm glad that after this vote, we finally will have that, and we've gotten the ball rolling. Now more than ever, it's so important that survivors of sexual assault and interpersonal violence know that when they come forward, they will be heard, they will be respected, and that they will be served. And I think that's what this program does. And I think that in the spirit of community collaboration and being out there and being accessible, this program really reduces a lot of barriers with the intent of making our community safer and healthier for all. So I'm very grateful for the progress that we've made here, and I'm excited to see the continued service provided by the investigators working on this program. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, Ethan. Is there any other board discussion? Okay, hearing none then, I would entertain a motion on this.
So I'm ready to make a motion, but I have a question for staff. I'm reading the agenda language, and it says the board will consider 2 versions of a contract with UCPD for the personal violence investigator. I think that may be the language from last meeting. I just want to clarify that for this motion.
It's a typo, but I think the motion can still be for the one that has been.
Fantastic. So I'll move to approve the contract with UCPD for intrapersonal violence investigator.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion made by Bertrand and seconded by Nguyen. And with that, I'll open public comment. Are there any public comments on this item? All right, hearing and seeing none, we'll bring it back to the board. I don't know if there's any last thoughts, but if not, I will bring it to a roll call vote.
Wait, Director Brett,
Yes.
Director Freeman,
Yes.
Bertrand,
Yes.
Hedges,
Yes.
Geis, Director Geis, did you?
Yes.
And Director Nguyen.
Yes.
All right, motion passes 6-0 with 1 recusal. Thanks again so much to our partners at UCPD who are working to try and do what we can to support survivors during this very difficult time. Okay, I want to move backwards on the agenda to item 4.2, which is the district COVID-19 response, and hand it over to Jonathan for any updates.
Great. Well, no big update in terms of anything new, but we have, well, actually there are a couple new things, but we have, the main thing for this is we compiled the response history, the things we've done to respond to COVID-19 that was asked for at the last meeting. So that's prepared. I think some of these are maybe updates to the board, but the door hanger that's going to get out some information to residents about more safety tips, how to report alternatives, mental health resources is being finalized this week. So is a letter that is going to be delivered to every household. So those was, and we also, I think I did not mention this at the last meeting because it hadn't happened yet, but we're promoting the health order violation reporting forms. We're promoting those newly on social media ads. And finally, Deborah worked with Sayer, our rental housing mediator, to develop a COVID-19 housemate compact. So it's going to be something almost done. We're waiting on an update to the health order to release that, but it's going to be a way for housemates or roommates to have a way to proactively agree to good behavior with each other. So those are some of the new things that we've gotten done in the last 2 weeks. And this is our list of everything we've worked on since March.
Excellent. Thank you for that update, Jonathan. And I know there's been a lot of questions about testing in Isla Vista and just the capacity in our community in general. Do you have any updates that you can share on that front?
Yeah, we don't have any dates of when testing will start yet, but I can tell you that the county sent some folks over to tour the community center to see if it's viable for testing, and it is, but we don't have a date of starting yet.
Great, thank you for sharing that.
And we're going to be moving the Wednesday, Friday homelessness services center to the community room with a pop out in the parking spots in front of it. Since if we did do testing, it would not, we couldn't do both in one spot.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. You said both.
Excellent.
Doing
that's
what?
great. I have it. Sorry, I think our wires crossed there. Christy, go ahead.
Oh, I was just asking what Jonathan said because he mentioned that we couldn't do two things at one time. I didn't hear the other.
The homeless services center, we're not going to
Okay.
have the community center anymore while the testing starts.
Okay.
We're going to move it. It's going to just be across the parking lot.
Okay.
Great. Well, that would be a big step forward. I know I've heard a lot in the community recently just about how we've done good. The county's done good things to make testing more accessible by moving it to Goleta, but that's still a burden for a lot of residents to be able to make it out there, especially if they don't have a vehicle. So very excited to hear that that could be on the horizon. I'll go to Director Bertrand.
Thank you. So I think we're continuing to see good progress with our residents doing the right thing, people practicing physical distancing, wearing masks. Director Brandt and I went out to see what it looked like in the community last weekend on, I believe, Friday or Saturday night. And we were delighted to see only 2 parties, which is huge progress from what we had seen a couple of weeks ago and what we would see on a normal night in Isla Vista. I'm not sure if anyone was out to observe this past weekend. Perhaps you saw continued good progress as well, but I really want to thank and commend Isla Vista residents who are doing the right thing, because that is making a difference. I think more people are being cognizant of really us being in the long haul on this, and that it's going to take all of us continuing to keep up our efforts at preventing the spread of the virus in order to keep our community healthy. So just great job to IV residents. And I'll have more to say on this when we get to the Halloween item as well.
Yeah, thank you for that update, Ethan. And I just want to say, well, a big thank you to everyone who is all, I think, coordinated and working together in between UC Santa Barbara, the county, the UC Santa Barbara Community Housing Office, and others. I know that there was some news today about how property management companies are making it very clear to their tenants that if they are hosting gatherings in violation of the public health order, they may face consequences. And I think that it's just so important. And I'm glad to see that property owners in trying to encourage residents to do the right thing and let them know that there are consequences to endangering their neighbors with these gatherings. So I was excited to see that be made public earlier this week, and I'm hoping that we can continue progress, because I know the mood a couple of weeks ago was that I was really feeling was that residents wanted those that were in flagrant violation to be held accountable. And I think that It's good that there is less happening now, but I think we'll continue to monitor the situation. I know I will, and I encourage other board members to as well, as it regards to cases and gatherings that we're observing.
Yes, and one more thing I want to bring up on this item is I think we've observed that one kind of missing piece to the Isla Vista COVID response is having a presence of folks or ambassadors or some sort of community liaison that is promoting physical distancing and perhaps passing out masks during these more active hours in our community on Friday and Saturday nights. And I had a conversation with Lieutenant Millard from UCSB Police Department. I think he's on the line here as well. At the end of last week, just checking in on the status of the Community Service Officer program at UCPD, because I do think that if we were to roll out our IV safety station programs again soon, I think that that could be a great community benefit of passing out masks to those who need them, and then also just having that that presence of, oh yeah, I see the safety station tent over there. They're passing out masks. Maybe there are some signs up that remind people of physical distancing and staying safe. I think that just having more of a presence out there on those nights from trusted messengers who are fellow students, fellow young people, I think that's really powerful. So if Lieutenant Millard has anything to say, I'd certainly welcome his comments.
Hi, this is Dave. Yeah, I've in speaking with Ethan, I've been working on it for a week or two, trying to shore up the CSOs, and it looks like with everything we have going on with remote learning and whatnot, we have about 13 that'll come back, which is enough to run the safety tents on Friday and Saturday night. It takes about 10 in looking at both running 2 tents. So I'm going to shore that up a little more, get positive committals from these folks. Right now, I'm probably 90% there. And then we can look at when we think a start date is or what that will look like in the near future. And I think incorporating some of these safety items with masks and messaging is a great idea. We're all willing to help.
Thank you.
Great, thanks for that update, Dave. That's really great to hear. And I think we've got a really unique opportunity right now, specifically to maybe engage other student groups as well to join together in promoting things like physical distancing and mask wearing, hand washing, all that good stuff. So glad to hear, and I know that you'll be working with our staff on how to make that happen. So
great.
Yeah, and Jonathan, maybe if we could bring that back as an agenda item for our next meeting.
Yeah, sounds good.
I do have one more thing that I want to share as it relates to COVID-19. I feel like I've had to bring this up a lot recently, and it doesn't really bring me any joy to, but one thing I do continue to see when I'm out on a Friday and Saturday night observing is many residents who are visibly angry about the sheriff's office unique policy as it relates to deputies wearing masks. I witnessed a girl yelling at a law enforcement officer, and I think that when I see that, I can't help but empathize with the anger, because I think that there's a lot of anger in the community about the way that COVID response has been handled at all levels of government, and that it's just really incumbent upon all of us to try and set that positive example. So, I, again, just really would implore and hope that we can find ways that all government personnel that are in public facing roles can be setting that positive example for our residents right now.
Spencer, can I comment on that briefly?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's Deputy Schroeder here. I think I saw you out last weekend. That was nice to see you guys out there. But we do have the full mask wearing policy in public. If any of our deputies are seen without a mask, they get instantly written up. And so The issue we have is we have a number of the foot patrol deputies who have a medical exemption from a doctor. And so we cannot disclose their condition to the public because of HIPAA violations, and we cannot force them to wear a mask. And so any healthy member of our department will be in a mask, but those with a medical exemption, we cannot force them to wear the mask. So that's why people are seeing them without the mask out there.
Right. And just as a follow-up to that, Justin, I know that it's not necessarily your job to be doing the assigning, I guess, of where people go, but is there a way that maybe for those folks that do have medically sensitive conditions, we want to emphasize with that, is there a way maybe for them to be in roles where they aren't interacting with members of the public? I just worry about everyone's health in an interaction, like that.
Sure, absolutely. And I know Juan has been working on that. He was the human resources lieutenant for a number of years, and so he knows the HR side of things pretty well. It gets into are we now discriminating against this employee, moving them involuntarily away from a station they want to work at because of a medical condition? And so I realize that we're in a state of an emergency, a pandemic, and so he's looking at that, but it's kind of a tightrope walk at the moment, but he is working on it.
All right. Well, thank you for that update, Justin, and we'll definitely follow up in that regard.
Can I say something, Spencer?
Yeah, go ahead, Christy.
I think a really big issue in Isla Vista right now is that many residents aren't aware of the consequences of COVID in large gatherings without physical distancing. And I've seen a lot of people party without masks, and there were bouncy houses prevalent and loud music. And in the case that a resident sees a party occurring, what can they do to stop it? Should they call UCPD, or you guys are saying something about a messenger? Like, what should they do to physically stop a party from occurring?
Jonathan, do you want to take that?
Yeah. So there's a couple different options people have. Like I said, we've been promoting the report violation forms, which they go to UCSB or the county. There's two of them, which is confusing, but you can use either one. It'll reach a similar result. And it's good to put proof on who these people are that are hosting it in your report. That's the main way we've been promoting what people can do. People are also able to call the non-emergency hotline for the sheriff's office if they are concerned about, something that's immediate that needs to be taken care of. And I can provide you those numbers, but we've been promoting these on social media for a couple of weeks now.
Okay, thank you. I've been in Isla Vista, and I've seen so many like bouncy houses, and I'm just not quite sure what they're not getting.
Right. Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more, Christy. It's so important that we reach people right now. And it is, I have been, I guess, a little bit enthused and excited about the outpouring of willingness that I've received from people who, when they do hear about a gathering, they want to stop it. They want to be a part of the solution. And I do encourage those people to report as much information as they can. Like Jonathan said, attach proof, take a picture if you've got a picture, or a screenshot of a text message. If you have the person's name, report their names, because I think that one of the really positive things about the COVID response right now is that UCSB, the county, Santa Barbara City College are all working together to try and see where the correct intervention can happen in order to try and either stop that gathering proactively or when necessary, perform education and then potentially disciplinary action as well. So I just really encourage people to continue using that reporting form and keeping the flow of information going. Director Thurlow.
Yeah, just real quick. I was just out there about an hour and a half ago. Nobody was wearing masks that were on the street. I mean, just nobody. People inside were wearing masks, but it's pretty disheartening to see. And I would just remind us all, these are the smartest people in our society. And the fact that they aren't exercising good judgment is a real disappointment to me as a guy who works with alumni at UCSB. So I would just wonder why these people are not acknowledging the fact this is a serious.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll have data about that sometime soon. The county's ambassadors were out in Isla Vista the week of Labor Day, handing out masks and asking people who reject them why. But they haven't gotten that information back to us, like what they discerned from that. But what they told me was 2 weeks before Labor Day, the week we had our last board meeting in August, they were out there then handing out masks, and they had universal refusal almost, but they didn't ask why. So they couldn't tell me why people didn't want them. They just told me that when they tried to pass out masks on the street with their ambassadors, almost everyone said no. And they weren't wearing masks. It's not like they were asking people who had cloth masks of their own already. They were unmasked people saying no.
Yeah, and I think some element of that is young people feeling invincible, and some of our neighbors not recognizing that this virus can have very serious effects on the health of young people. Maybe not as frequently as folks who are older who get the virus, but I mean, I just ask our community members to look at the statistics from last week. Someone in our county between the ages of 18 to 29 passed away from COVID-19. And if there continues to be an outbreak in Isla Vista, I mean, right now our cases seem to be stabilizing a bit, but if there was a significant surge in cases in Isla Vista, people could see a friend who is young get very sick and ill. And just as important as that, all of us are capable of spreading it, even asymptomatically, to older folks who could be especially susceptible. So I echo your concerns, George. I think we're seeing improvement on the gathering side, but we do need folks to be wearing their masks while out. And I also echo Spencer's concern. All public serving officials need to be wearing masks while they're on the job and interacting in close proximity with community members. I too have seen those interactions in the community.
Thank you, Ethan. Director Freeman.
I just want to verify with a question that so when I've been outside, I've largely seen people wearing masks when they're in clumps or together. I have not been particularly under the impression that we need to wear masks if we're not interacting with people. And I mean, this even like the CDC guidelines, I think, or it's you wear masks outside if you are in positions where you're unable to maintain sufficient social distancing. So I just want to verify that we are talking about people who are maybe on I almost said State Street, on Pardal, who are like close together or like walking past each other. Like those people, are people we're talking about aren't wearing masks, or is it people who are like wandering around much more separate from each other?
You know, Jay, I had that question to you a couple of months ago when the mask orders were being revised and updated a little bit. And I think the answer that I got that was really compelling is that if you step outside and you're walking down the street, you don't necessarily have control over whether you suddenly become in a interaction with someone that where you cannot maintain physical distancing. So my advice to residents is that if you're walking around outside of your home, do be wearing a mask. Even if you are in groups where you may think, well, I'm just walking to the store with my housemate and we're in our bubble, we're in our pod, and we'll put on our mask if we have to go inside the store. I think it's just so much better for everyone if we do wear a mask at all times when we're outside. And additionally, I think that there's a little bit of a factor of helping just being a good example and spreading that positive awareness of mask wearing being not just a normal thing to do, but the right thing to do. So I don't know if that answers your question, Jay.
And I'll say that the information we're putting out there is from the governor's office, and it's, they produce some videos, and the video we used from them to put out into the community says, put on a mask before you open your door to leave, and then take it off when you get back home. And that's what the governor's office is putting out there in California Public Health.
For what it's worth, my question was less about what is the correct thing to do and more about concretely when we're talking about, we're having a discussion about lots of people in IV not wearing masks. I'm just curious, are we talking about lots of people in IV not wearing masks when they're walking close to each other and around each other? Or are we talking about a lot of people outside not wearing masks when they're not like that, but they are when they're, I mostly end up being around the stores area, I guess. And so, I mean, I see a lot of people wearing masks, it felt to me, but.
I think I see instances where people are walking around in large groups and not wearing masks. And I mean, they're walking around in a group, and that's a concern for me. If those folks were wearing masks while they're in those groups, that would make it a little safer.
Right. And just to wrap up this part of the discussion, I'd say I don't think that the issue of having people who are in areas where other public people in the public are and not wearing masks, I don't think that issue is unique to Isla Vista. I think that we've seen across society that continues to be something that is grappled with, and we've made some positive steps, but we can always make more positive steps, and we can always do better. And that's what's going to be required if we're going to come out of this pandemic and really make a positive step forward in terms of our caseload. So it is really just on all of us to really not let our guard down right now and to continue doing the right thing. So with that, I don't know if there's any other discussion on this update. What I'm going to do now is just open up public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? All right. I'm going to close public comment and back to the board. If there's no other discussion, I think we can close this item and move on to the next one. Oh, I see Director Bertrand.
Thank you. Yeah, just one last comment. I want our neighbors to recognize that if we do not have continued progress in reducing the case number and reducing the spread, it's very possible that people will not be back in classrooms for a long time. The California State University system recently announced that 23 CSU campuses will be closed for the rest of the academic year. They will not be having in-person classes in the spring. And I think that would be something very detrimental to our community from, a position of people wanting to be in class with their peers during this very important time in their life. Also to the just the success of our local businesses that are just struggling to get by. And if we do not continue to take action to reduce this spread by everyone doing their part, we could be on track to a situation like that. So I think that's also a message for us to get out among our neighbors.
Thank you for that, Director Bertrand. So with that, I will close item 4, and we will move on our agenda. We're going to move to 4.4, which is the Resolution 20-12 Budget Amendment, Elimination of Community Policing and Transfer to Community Special Projects Fund. This is an item being brought back after our vote last week, and now we have the resolution in front of us that we can officially vote on. Oh, I'm seeing my internet connection is unstable. I hope everyone was able to hear me. But with, I think we had a robust discussion last week, and I don't know if I personally have any more to add other than that I'm supportive of this and would entertain a motion.
And just really quick, I wanted to note that what was originally posted as the resolution, we just made a couple word changes where the word fund was used not in line with how we use that word. So we just made it appropriation. So that's the only change, but just wanted to note that Bob called me on Monday and we made a couple wording changes to make it in line with how we do our budget.
I will move to adopt resolution 20-12, budget amendment, elimination of community policing appropriations, is what was the word you just used?
Yeah.
And transfer to community special project appropriations.
Right.
I'll second the motion.
Motion made by Freeman and seconded by Bertrand. And Ethan, do you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Well, thank you to staff for a quick turnaround on this. Thank you to our legal counsel. Bob, thank you for helping catch the technicalities related to a budget amendment. That's appreciated. Like we discussed last time, we're all committed to making Isla Vista a safer place, and public safety can be achieved through many different means that are not directly related to law enforcement services. I think law enforcement has an important role to play, especially as we look to see how law enforcement can be better equipped to serve our community in a holistic way. But there are a lot of elements of public safety that are related to how we work together as a community to be more resilient, to create a better living environment for everyone. And I think that's what we're doing with this transfer. And as always, just thank you to the residents who have engaged with this. And thank you to everyone who's going to continue to work on this. Black Lives Matter. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ethan. Are there any other board comments on this item? All right. Is there any public comments on this item?
Yeah,
Okay.
public comment. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm
This is
hearing.
Peter
Who is this
Newshore.
on the
I'm a
phone?
taxpayer. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Peter Newshore. Yeah. By the way, I had a great deal of difficulty getting into this meeting. There's no button on your website, which is inexcusable. I finally got in and it's been cutting out in and out the entire time. As you have explained ad nauseum, we're in the middle of a COVID pandemic. At some point, the County of Santa Barbara may be compelled to issue tickets to people who are not following the necessary protocol to contain this virus. A lot of people, for example, work in Isla Vista and end up working downtown. I can say from personal experience that people infected in Isla Vista have already taken that into businesses in town. So assuming we have a bad fall, to quote some of our scientists, we may need community policing in Isla Vista in the form of issuing tickets to people who are not following the rules. Now, I thought personally that the community policing your organization had implemented was somewhat progressive, even from the perspective of distaste for the police, deserved distaste in some areas of this country. And yet now you are eliminating it in the middle of a pandemic. I think that's irresponsible and a threat to the health of the community. I'm particularly disappointed that whoever it is that sits on this committee that represents the County of Santa Barbara is actually voting to get rid of community policing. It's inexplicable to me. There's a lot of dialogue going on now between my neighbors and members of at the university over the problems which you've also outlined ad nauseum of people not following the rules out here. So we are going to need community policing, and you are going to regret getting rid of it. Thank you. And by the way, I want
Thanks. I think you might have come out there at the end. Can I just let me just say as a point of clarification here, the fund that we are moving right now is not connected with our community service officer program or with our interpersonal violence investigator program. And I think that's an important distinction to make. I continue to be supportive of this because I think having a empty pot of money, a blank check that law enforcement can utilize sends the wrong message right now. And we've had it in our budget for 2 years. I think that it's been a good thing to have as a potential thing for making the community more safe. But I think what's really clear right now is that we can make the community safe in ways that don't necessarily involve policing. And so I think it's a really positive step for us to be moving this towards the community programs budget, where we can really reprioritize this money towards making the community safe in a more holistic manner. Director Bertrand, I saw you had your hand up, and then I'll go over to Director Freeman.
Yes, I essentially was going to say the same thing that you said very well. But one more thing I'll add is I've also done a lot of thinking about this, and to be fully transparent, 2 years ago during the budget cycle, creating this fund was one of my top priorities. This was something that I pushed, recognizing a need for how do we continue to make our community safer in a way that's collaborative and that responds to the needs of the community. And 2 years later, I see that there's a different way to do that. So I also want to just mention that this is a process of receiving direct feedback from a lot of our constituents and adjusting. And that's really the beauty of what we're doing here and being responsive to the calls from the community and what we're learning during this important national discussion. On top of working to create this fund, for my first 5 or 6 years being active in local advocacy, I was a very strong advocate for additional community policing services. And I've seen some of the benefits of that, and I've seen some things that were not beneficial. And I just really want to emphasize that we are learning as we go, and that we're responding to feedback from the community, and ultimately working to make this a safer place.
Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you now.
Oh, great. Okay. Sorry, I had to switch to phone audio because I think my audio wasn't working very well. But I'll go over to you, Director Freeman.
Yes, I wanted to first underscore something that Spencer had said, that we went into much greater detail at the previous meeting to make it more explicit, that this is a line item in our budget that has not been used for the past 2 years. And even you could, I think there's actually reasonable arguments to be made that governments having essentially, the wording was even used, having a blank check, but essentially having line items in our budget for which we're not entirely certain what we're going to use them in the future for years on end is something that isn't really how you're normally going to do that. And so this is, I think, more of a reorganization reflection of what our intent is to actually be spending money. And then when you look at that, I really want to comment on though is this idea that community policing, particularly the way that we were using that term when we were working on this budget item a long time ago. And this is of course, I'm not speaking for the board, but I just want to be clear that this is something that my understanding of our description that we were having for this wouldn't be aligned with paying the police to go issue tickets to people. That to me isn't community policing. I appreciate, if you take the words, you might think that that's policing the community, but that's not. When we were trying to do community policing, it was more about addressing the idea that having police officers be the front line of showing up at somebody's house in order to do something to a party, or having a police officer going around in cars or something like that. That we were trying to have something that was more policing operating inside of the community. And so we're looking at this community policing fund. It's not that we're taking money away from something we're already doing. We're not. We were reorganizing some budget line items for something that was never used, and it's not going to prevent. It's not money that would have been intended to be used to proactively go out and just have police give people tickets. And there's one other thing, which is it's close enough. It's not what we're doing here. Is we're not suddenly. Oh yeah, and as a to the extent to which the government should be going out and giving people tickets or doing whatever kind of enforcement, that's something that really should be coming out of the police department's budget, right? Like, why would Isla Vista Community Service District be trying to figure out how to pay for that particular level of service from the sheriff's department? And that's something where I would find it really awkward and potentially start feeling a lot like, are we supplanting something? We're just paying for more ticketing, but like, why are they unable to do that themselves? But I don't know.
Thank you for those comments, Director Freeman. Is there any other board comments or discussion? All right, then with that, we've had a motion on the table. It's been made and seconded. So Jonathan, can you do a roll call vote?
Yes. Director Brandt?
Yes.
Director Freeman?
Yes.
Director Bertrand?
Yes.
Director Hedges?
No.
Director Thurlow?
No.
Director Geis?
Yes.
Director Nguyen?
Yes.
Motion passes. All right. Thanks, everyone, and we look forward to more discussion in the future. Now we're going to go to item 4.5, and this is on the City of Goleta's Halloween parking restrictions. And this is an item sponsored by Director Bertrand, so I just want to hand it over to him to introduce it.
Yes, thank you, President Brandt. I put this item on here after really doing some consideration and examination of the City of Goleta's Halloween parking restriction program, which I don't have any position on whether or not they should be still doing the parking restrictions. That's their jurisdiction and their prerogative. And I think they've been thoughtful about what the actual restrictions look like. However, as you see in the staff report that's attached with the draft letter, the staff report that was provided to the Goleta City Council on I don't know the exact date of the meeting, but a meeting about a week and a half to 2 weeks ago, it had a lot of inaccurate information about Isla Vista and the types of conditions that we're seeing here during Halloween and Deltopia. For example, a direct quote from the staff report, it says, each year, the city experiences impacts from events held in Isla Vista with an estimated 25,000 people per year passing through Goleta for Isla Vista events such as Halloween and Deltopia. The resolution passed by the council says, quote, residents of the unincorporated community of Isla Vista and others have historically organized and engaged in unpermitted assembly and street partying attended by thousands of residents and visitors that has included excessive and illegal use of alcohol, which has not been successfully restrained by residents or governing authorities. While a lot of these descriptions may have been accurate years ago, Isla Vista has made a lot of progress in becoming a safer place during both the Halloween and Deltopia weekends. And a lot of that has occurred based on the efforts of our partners, law enforcement, community members, and really being proactive and changing the story about what Halloween and Deltopia looks like. So I put together in partnership with our staff the draft letter, just because I do think it's important that we respond to this in the spirit of partnership, so that going forward, there can be an accurate description of what does occur in our community, and that so ultimately all of us can work better together to promote safety on these weekends.
Thank you for those comments, Director Bertrand. I want to really just thank you for bringing this to our attention and placing this on our agenda, because I agree. We do need to be working together in partnership, especially now more than ever. I reviewed the staff report from the city and was concerned about a lot of the same things that I think you are. There was also a portion in there that spoke about droves of students moving into the community that were not affiliated with UCSB. And my immediate thought and concern with that is that students at other universities, such as Santa Barbara City College, are members of our community as well. And I think it just sends the wrong message to assume that all students living in Isla Vista are UCSB students. We also have many students in our community that attend Isla Vista Elementary, many working families that live here. And it's just important to recognize the holisticness, I think, of our community. Additionally, this rumor that's been going around just about the idea of students from colleges outside of the area moving into Isla Vista, I just think is, I think as public officials, it's our job to call out fake news when we see it. And I really think that we can all do better at, fact checking some of this information before we start to talk about our community like this. And so I appreciate the spirit of this letter. And I think that it's a really good way to start this conversation, because ultimately we do want to work in partnership to try and make sure that we make this weekend in October and all weekends as safe as we possibly can.
That's right, Spencer. And one more thing I'll add is I spoke with KUIT right after this decision, and my message was not on the content of the decision, but just on Halloween and Deltopia, and about how we're working together to create a safe weekend in our community, and that's what we expect. And when I saw the TV coverage later that night, there was a lot of B-roll of just out of control events in Isla Vista from the early 2010s. Before myself, Spencer, Christy, many of us on this call got to Isla Vista. And I think that this type of account where we're talking about, or where a different government is talking about 25,000 people coming to an event that's out of control, I think that's what really drives these image issues of Isla Vista over time. And I mean, I appreciate the media coverage of Isla Vista, and I think that a lot of it is done to be as accurate as possible. But when we're showing images and videos of just scenes that are totally not representative of what our community has looked like over the past 6 years, that can definitely be damaging, because ultimately we want to show the community what Isla Vista looks like and how all of us are working together to be safe and responsible. And the last thing I'll just mention up front is there is one specific correction to make, which in the letter it mentions the September 25th council meeting, and that's obviously the September 15th. So just I'll note that for staff for us to edit for the final copy.
Thank you for that, Director Bertrand. I'll just piggyback back off that, because one thing you said really resonated with me about the way that we talk about these things ends up sort of becoming self-fulfilling prophecies. Student leaders at UC Santa Barbara for years made the correct point that when we embark on things and media campaigns that advertise to others, hey, there's a crazy party happening in Isla Vista, stay away. That's not always the right way to approach achieving what our goals are for having a safe community event. And UC Santa Barbara and other community stakeholders have listened and have started to take a different approach. And we as a board were very involved in that through all of our efforts to pursue an organized festival during this past spring that unfortunately was put on pause due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, I am really proud of the fact that I think that conversation has started to shift away from some of those methods and towards better community-centric ideas. So with that, I'll open it up to other board members if there's any other thoughts or discussion. All right. In that case, I'd be happy to entertain a motion. Director Bertrand?
Thank you. I'll move that we pass and send a letter to the Goleta City Council in regard to the temporary on-street parking restrictions for the 2020 Isla Vista Halloween event.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion made by Bertrand, second by Nguyen. And with that, I will open up the public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? All right, I will bring it back to the board. Any other board discussion on the motion? Director Thurlow?
Yeah, I'm going to abstain on this. This item is listed as City of Goleta Halloween parking restrictions. In reality, we're now voting on sending a critical letter to the City of Goleta. I'm going to abstain because I think this is way off of what this agenda item supposedly was going to discuss. So I just want to note that number 5 should say proposed response to City of Goleta for future reference.
Thanks for that comment, George. Ross, are we within agenda item action parameters on this? Ross, are you there?
Well, let me text him. Maybe we were just.
Sorry, I didn't unmute myself. The agenda item indicates that the board's going to hear an update on the City of Goleta's Halloween parking restrictions and then may give direction to staff. I don't think it's really clear that it was intended that a suggested letter was going to be considered at the time under the agenda item. I think the motion can be to give direction to staff to come back. I think George's criticism sounds in the idea that maybe there wasn't sufficient time for the board to consider this response. That said, I mean, certainly the letter is before the board right now for possible consideration, but my recommendation would be that any direction to staff would be to prepare a finalized letter for the board to approve at the next meeting.
Just a question. I appreciate that that information, Ross. But Jonathan, you can clarify. This letter went out with the agenda on Saturday, right? Or shortly after the agenda on Saturday?
I attached it, yes, on Saturday when you sent it to me, which was before the agenda went out. So
yeah. So I just want to make it clear for everyone. We've all had time to review this. But if anyone is uncomfortable with it, I certainly respect that.
Well, I'm mostly uncomfortable with sort of the process. Now, I don't know, and maybe I'm out of line here and we're past the point of discussion, but the process of this should really be that our general manager meets with the City of Goleta's general manager, and they discuss this without there being this big public letter that essentially is critical of the City of Goleta, which has gone out of its way for the last 4 or 5 years to accommodate the fact that the situation in Isla Vista has had horrible impacts on their constituents. This isn't their Goleta parking is not coming from the city council. In fact, if you look at the history of it, city council members were reluctant to go along with this. It was their constituents that say, their constituents are neighbors. I mean, we're talking about people who live on Stork Road. So it's just, I would have preferred to see a more judicious process where we don't get in the habit of sending, critical letters to our fellow government agencies. But neither here nor there. I'm fine with it going. I'm fine with it going forward, but I'm going to abstain on it.
Sure, I appreciate that. And as the person who brought this to the agenda, I will just say that this is simply just a written response to their multi-page written document, both staff report and resolution, that it contained a lot of false and inflammatory language about supposed activities in Isla Vista. And this is just a concise written response to a statement that was issued. I appreciate our partnership with Goleta on a lot of things. And I think that this is just us doing our job as representatives of Isla Vista, working to make Isla Vista a safer place. If our council's recommendation is to renotice this for our next meeting, I think that's certainly fine for us to do.
Mr. President, if I could, following up on Director Bertrand's comment, if the board wants to have this go out, my recommendation would, and not have it be continued to the next meeting, then to be more consistent with the agenda item as it's written, is to give direction to staff to send out this response on behalf of the board with a revision indicating that the board voted by whatever the eventual board vote ends up being. So the motion would be to direct staff to issue or transmit the letter to the city of Goleta with a revision to indicate the final vote of the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Is that language friendly with the motion maker and seconder?
Very friendly. Thank you. That was very helpful.
All right. Any other comments from members of the board on this motion? Director Freeman.
I'll say that I actually agree with George. And I had gone through before that. I'm not on the noticing if possible like part, although I'm not even certain if you really said that, but I had read through the report and the letter and everything before the meeting, but I didn't feel like the report went that far out of its way. Ethan was describing like lots of inflammatory language, even like going back through and trying to reread it. It's really the sentence that was being called out from the resolution with the whereas clause, that is, making commentary about Isla Vista in some negative light. But the rest of it is if anything, it was even somewhat like okay. The idea of like they specifically went out of their way to say that it's out of towners that are causing issues, and that they feel their parking restrictions are being helpful, and then that one whereas clause is saying, it did irk me a bit, but it irked me in a way that almost seems compatible with the complaint about it, in that it says that historically organized and engaged in unpermitted assembly. And I might question, well, did that ever happen? But then our complaint about it apparently during this meeting was, well, that's not happened recently. And it's like, well, they're just saying it happened historically. And so I imagine sending this letter is going to cause a really annoying argument on the other side, where they're going to essentially be looking at this letter and saying that, like, no, they're upset because we even mentioned something that we think is actually true. And like, why are they upset that we said historically? And I don't think it's going to go well or help us in any real way in our attempts at working with the city of Goleta. It is something where they have felt somewhat bitter in some way that they feel like they have to do this. As George has mentioned, it's something where it's not like they really had actively been, as a board, really, not the city council really wanted to do this sort of thing. It was something where they were essentially scraping together the fees for it. I remember when they lost the used to be that and I forgot his name, but the guy who runs Camino Real is this Camino Real Public Safety Fund. And when they lost access to that fund because he decided to start pulling funding from various things, and they still decided that they thought this was actually helpful, and they started, it was kind of necessary. And it's like, I don't really think it's the right approach. And so I agree with George. I'm one thing is I'm not just going to stay, and I'm going to vote no if we vote on this sort of thing. If it's just direction, by the way, I'm not in agreement with it.
Sure. So, I mean, if I'm the only person who, well, if Spencer and I are the only two people who feel strongly about this, I don't think I'll continue with putting this up for a vote. But I am, I mean, I am surprised at the reaction. It's really unacceptable for local partners that have all of this information to be making dangerous statements about just things that are not reality. And I'm really concerned about that. I think that it puts our community in a bad light. And I think that it also creates a safety risk where we've heard many accounts over the years of students talking about, well, when you publicize that Isla Vista is this out of control place, that people will come to that. So I definitely am nervous about that. And I think we need this just never to happen again, and for there to be better collaboration in the future. Because I even see on here, there's references about consulting with different law enforcement stakeholders. And in my research on this, I looked at the statistics that are cited by the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Office each year. And one thing that we see there, particular to Halloween, is that there were 12,000 to 13,000 people in 2013, 2,000 to 3,000 people in 2014, 500 to 1,000 people in 2015, and quote, no crowds between 2016 and 2018. On the Deltopia side, we've seen a lot of success as well in recent years with less than 10,000 people in attendance at Deltopia, where we have more than 15,000 residents of our community and more than 10,000 people living on UCSB campus. So I am frustrated on this, just because it is very important that we are being precise and accurate with how we plan for community safety events in our community. That being said, I don't want to force the board to submit a letter that does not have broad backing by board members.
Yes, thank you for that, Ethan. And I'll just say, I guess, to follow up on the beginning of your statement, I agree. I still do feel very strongly that it's important for us to, like I said, call out fake news when it exists. We as government agencies have a responsibility to be dealing in reality and dealing with the facts. And that means that we accurately portray the situation as it exists on the ground. And I'll reiterate that I was just really taken aback by the representation as Isla Vista as a community only for UCSB students, and the sort of exclusion of other students that live in our community, and this inaccurate portrayal of what the situation is like right now. I will share too that, and I don't know if Jonathan can speak to if he's had any contact with staff in the city of Goleta, but I was hopeful and had encouraged, I think, at least one to reach out just in general when it comes to event planning, that we do want to help provide any assistance that we can. I think it's well known that one of our district's biggest strengths has been community outreach and knowing how to reach residents. And so that was sort of the spirit of the, the offer, I guess. And I don't know if you heard anything from them, but I take it, given this letter, that you didn't, and that they sort of were just operating in a vacuum on this.
I haven't heard from the city of Goleta on anything related to Halloween or anything like that.
Spencer, real quick, I don't want to belabor this, but you and Jonathan on Friday will be at a meeting to discuss Halloween preparations, which you're going to have the floor to make all these points to not just the city of Goleta, but to everybody else in the community. It seems to me that's the forum, that's the venue where you make these points, and as opposed to a letter, which, I mean, you're just setting a precedent here, which is every time somebody says something wrong about Isla Vista, we're going to send a letter, and that's all we're going to be doing, because we can start with a sheriff.
Right. Well, I'll say, George, I'll continue to make these points. And I have been making these points about how people talk about Isla Vista in meetings just like that for the last 2 years. So that's why I'm supportive of this letter. And that's why we're having the discussion in public, because sometimes it seems like there's a disconnect and the message isn't quite getting through to the people that need to hear it. So that's where I'm at on this. And, you know, if Ethan doesn't want, I don't know, if the board doesn't want to bring it to a vote, you know, then I'm okay with that. But I am supportive of us moving forward with something like this.
Yeah, and I guess to close on a positive note, I do just want to recognize the incredible work of so many student groups to make a difference in Isla Vista during these festival weekends over the years. We appreciate you. We've worked with you. We've participated in these different efforts, from UCIV to Haunt the Loop to other efforts. I mean, they really have paid off. So while some people don't recognize the value of those efforts and the results, we're really proud of those and really want to thank everyone who's been involved with that.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Ethan. I don't know if there's any other board discussion or if we want to move forward to the next agenda item, but I think it was valuable to have that discussion.
Don't you have a motion and a second on the floor?
Yeah, I'll withdraw the motion respectfully.
Thank you for that discussion, Director Bertrand. All right, we're going to move to item 4.6, which is the Halloween 2020 update. In the same vein, I'll hand it over to Jonathan for some updates.
Cool. So there is not a lot of concrete things for me to report on what we're doing for Halloween 2020, but the main one that I was going to mention is that we are going to a meeting this Friday of all the agencies and stakeholders to discuss Halloween planning efforts. And while I did, you know, at the last board meeting, it was brought up that can we talk to Lucidity about maybe they can do a virtual kind of event, either on Halloween or leading up to it or afterwards. But one on Halloween as an anchor. And so I did receive from them that they are interested in thinking about it, but want to know more of what we want and, you know, where we're at on this. But I didn't have anything concrete to tell them in terms of what kind of budget we had approved. But I also don't know what they're thinking on price. So I wanted to let the board know that that conversation is happening with Lucidity. I want to make sure that that's, you know, in line with where you were thinking. If you brought something back.
No, most of them are people on this board.
I was asking the board to see if that's in line with what you wanted. So I got distracted with someone who wasn't muted. So yes, I've talked to Lucidity. They are interested in helping us in putting forward events this fall and Halloween. But is that something the board wants me to continue exploring with them?
I'll go to Director Freeman.
I'm very excited about the idea of having some kind of alternative online COVID, or not COVID programming, but programming because of COVID. I do have to always ask the question, because the last time this came up a while ago when we were looking at, might have been for Beltopia, I asked the question and the answer was not so positive. Ross, are we allowed to spend money to contract with Lucidity in order to run an online event?
I think that it would really depend upon what the type of services that are going to be provided and how they would end up being provided. Because with an online virtual event, there's no real programming that's being done at a community, a community facility. So I think it would depend greatly on the scope of the services that the board is considering having Lucidity provide, and then comparing that against the specifics of the activated powers of the district under 61, 250. I'm not saying it's not possible, but I'm saying that it would be highly dependent upon what would be provided and how it would be provided under the specific terms of the contract.
Thank you.
And what I've been thinking, and again, since we just have put out the feelers with them and we haven't gotten anything back, but the thought would be that, you know, maybe it's physically for just one person at the community room, and then it's virtually for everyone else, and that, you know, it's in our community facility in a way. But since people are legally not able to gather at our facility, they can, you know, experience it virtually. So I'm still working out with them how, you know, what they're thinking in the first place too.
Yeah, I'll just say I'm very supportive of this idea. I think that this is great. You know, we have money in our budget specifically for community programming as it relates to the community center. And the real sad part about COVID-19 is that we haven't been able to really tap into that and try and bring some of the culture change that we want to see in the community based around these types of cultural and social programming. Especially, I think we have a great opportunity with Halloween coming up, where people are used to gathering, but unfortunately can't this year, where we can try and connect people in this virtual space. And I'm really glad that we can bring in potentially a group like Lucidity that gets the student culture that is really just second to none when it comes to just arts in our community. And I think that it's a great idea for us to look into. And I like that. Yeah, maybe it is, you know, a band playing at the community center and it's live streamed in some sort of special way. Just things that we can do to try and engage people in the comfort of their own homes right now, I think will be a really crucial part of making sure that we have a successful Halloween where people stay safe and healthy. Any other comments from other board members?
Yeah, I think that this is definitely something good to bring up at the Friday meeting. And I definitely encourage us to also speak with AS Program Board about this. I think that if it sounds like there's a strong desire from the community to move forward with this, and I mean, I think that generally this would be something that a lot of people support, but just I know that Program Board and the university have been discussing alternative events as well. So just to make sure that this is all working together and that we're not duplicating.
Right, exactly. Yes, the AS Program Board's my next email out now that I got some info from Lucidity last night.
That's great. And one more thing I'll mention just on Halloween planning in general. I think back to when we were having similar discussions after we had to cancel our alternative Deltopia event about how do we keep Deltopia safe. And the residents stepped up and did the right thing. And there was a lot of great messaging that went into it. And there was, I mean, sacrifice by residents who usually wanted to go out and celebrate that weekend, but everyone recognized the extraordinary measures that needed to be taken, and people stayed home. People didn't have parties, and we didn't see a spike in cases then. So I'm confident that if we continue to do the right messaging and get the right stakeholders on board, that we'll see a good result with this as well.
Thanks for those comments, Ethan. Any other board discussion? All right, well, with that, I think maybe a good way to move forward would just be to direct staff to work with stakeholders to support virtual programming for the Halloween. And with that, trying to leave it broad so that we continue to have these discussions. And I'm happy to make that motion, or if anyone else wants to. Okay, not hearing a.
I'll make that motion. I'll make the motion.
All right. Made by Thurlow. Is there a second?
I'll second. And I'm sorry, it cut out on my side while you were making the motion. But aside from just the virtual event possibilities, is there also just a broad provision of continuing to plan with stakeholders just generally about Halloween?
I think that was the motion last meeting. Was that? So I think it's still active.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Sounds good. But yeah, I'll second the motion that George made.
All right. So with that, I'll open public comment. Is there any comment on the motion? All right, I'll bring it back to the board. Any other further discussion? All right, then we'll call the question. Jonathan, can you call the roll?
Director Brandt,
Yes.
Director Freeman,
Yes.
Director Bertrand,
Yes.
Director Hedges,
Yes.
Director Thurlow,
Yes.
Director Geis,
Yes.
Director Nguyen. Director Nguyen.
All right. We can leave the roll open for Director Nguyen.
Oh,
but
I'm
so far,
sorry.
sounds good.
I'm sorry. I was getting my dog. Yes.
Excellent. All right. Motion passes unanimously. Okay. Well, great. Thanks, everyone, and looking forward to further discussing Halloween preparation at future meetings. Next on the agenda is the County of Santa Barbara Homelessness Encampments Task Force update. This is a task force that myself and Jonathan have been participating in. It includes representatives from the CSD, from the county housing department, as well as the 3rd District Office, UC Santa Barbara, the volunteer organization Food Not Bombs, the Isla Vista community gardens, or a number of community gardens. And Jonathan, I don't know if I'm missing anyone in that list.
I don't think so. I think that's all of them.
Oh, and the United Way and other just homeless outreach and service providing groups. And given the situation in Isla Vista and what I think is a perceived rise of homelessness occurring in our community, we think it was important to have an update on this group and some of the things that have been accomplished over the last couple of months, and just have a discussion in general. So I want to give a repack of some of the things that have happened since the pandemic started. So when the pandemic began, I think, as many are aware of, but many are also not aware of, the Centers for Disease Control issued guidance encouraging municipalities and government agencies not to move homeless encampments. And the thinking behind that was, number one, keeping our community safe and discouraging the travel and moving around of individuals who are unhoused. Number two, out of the effort to try and not sever connections between homeless service providers and their clients, people experiencing homelessness during this especially unique time that we are encountering. In addition to that, the group was able to place restrooms and portable restrooms and hand washing stations in a number of our parks. It was able to provide trash takeaway and cleanup services in the month of July, where residents who were in the parks were asked to limit their area where they were storing their belongings, and also encouraged to utilize the trash takeaway services to get rid of things that were unnecessary. In addition to that, one of the key and I think most important things that's come out of this group is the county has funded an additional outreach contract to the organization CityNet. And what these homeless outreach workers do is try and get folks connected with services in order for folks to receive things like housing, things like healthcare. They need to be in this coordinated entry system. And one of the things that I saw as I've toured the parks and spoken with people experiencing homelessness was when we asked them the question of whether or not they had been connected with an outreach worker or a service provider, the majority of people that I spoke to at the time, and this was in July, answered no. And I think that that really speaks to the unique moment that we're in county and region wide with the really thin resources. And so I think it's really a great thing that we have now moved forward and have additional dedicated outreach for Isla Vista. Additionally, the group was able to review the Isla Vista Recreation and Park District's policy, the draft encampment management plan that they were proposing for the board. At the time, we were asked to keep it private, and I think that's been the subject of some discussion in the community and some lack of transparency there. And I will just say that regardless of what any of us think of the policy or the approach, I think that it was really valuable to have people who are homeless outreach and service providers and other government agencies helping provide feedback to improve the document and try and help the park district, I think, better accomplish some of its goals. And I really did appreciate that aspect of the group as well. So those are some of the things that have been happening recently. And outside of the Homeless Encampments Task Force, as our board will recall, we have taken action to fund additional homeless outreach positions as well. In addition to that, the coordinated entry hours at the community center and now soon to be the community room are expanded to Wednesdays and Fridays. And so I just think that it's really important for us to continue to be appraised of what the issues that our neighbors experiencing homelessness are and how we can better improve the situation during what is sure to be a long haul, I think, as our country grapples with the financial crisis associated with COVID-19 as well as the health crisis. So Jonathan, feel free, I know it's a long opening, but feel free to add anything else that you want to add as well about the task force.
Yeah, there's not much else to add. I mean, what I can say, I don't know if you read their mission statement, but I can read that for the public to know, which is the goal of this group is to determine interventional steps to assist those experiencing homelessness and make open spaces safe for all to enjoy while following CDC guidance. Some of the things coming up on the agenda is to map out areas where housing can be developed in Isla Vista or housing can be provided, like empty lots and vacant land, and also helping deal with inclement weather that's coming up as winter approaches. But again, this is not a group where we are actively doing a lot of the work of the group, but we're participating in it and providing input on things. I think one of the questions that came up last week that was not really answered, that I couldn't give you a straight answer of what the answer was, is once they figure out some of these ideas of where housing can be developed, who's going to be championing this? Who's going to be continuing the project, working on it? Because that's not really something the district is necessarily empowered to do. So we didn't really get a straight answer on that, and I hope we can get one in the future. And then I think that might have been one of the reasons why this was requested to be on the agenda by Directors Freeman and Thurlow, was the transparency of the group on what it's doing. So we don't really have a lot of materials or attachments. That's why nothing was attached to it, because we just get an agenda every 2 weeks. There was some issues at one point with, who's gonna manage the group, and that was thankfully resolved. So yeah, I think one of the concerns that board members brought up, and it was brought up by other groups, was our participation in these meetings. Like Spencer mentioned, we were shared a policy that was asked to be kept private, but then the sense was later shown that we were endorsing or supporting or had given feedback, when in fact, me and Spencer, and we talked to Ross about this, is we explicitly did not give feedback on that policy to avoid the appearance of endorsing it without the board having looked at it. So wanted to make that point, because I know that a few of you had brought that up to me.
Thanks for that, Jonathan. I'm going to go to Director Thurlow.
Yeah, I just want to thank Jonathan and Spencer for the hard work you've put in on this. This is a really, really, really difficult issue, and it doesn't seem like there's a light at the end of the tunnel here. So I appreciate the fact that you have represented us well in these discussions among many, many stakeholders. So I just want to thank you for your service on that task force.
Thank you.
Are there any other board members that wish to speak? All right. With that, then I guess I will open up public comment. Any public comments on this item? All right, I will bring it back to the board then. So I think this is just an update. I don't think there's really any action unless someone has something that hasn't been mentioned yet. But I will say I actually recently had some virtual dialogue just about the issue of homelessness in our community and how we can best support our neighbors experiencing homelessness. And the comment was made, and I don't think it was a malicious comment necessarily, but it was made by a resident who said, I just don't feel like anybody cares. And my message to them was that from being involved in this group and seeing the hard work that our homeless outreach staff and service providers are doing, I can tell you that that is the complete opposite. They care 100%. They care very much about our community and supporting our neighbors experiencing homelessness and trying to help them improve their lives, and with the goal of having them become fully housed, fully supported. And I know members of our board, such as Father John, have committed a very substantial portion of your professional life to that endeavor as well. So my message to her was, there are a lot of people that care right now. Ultimately, what really it's incumbent upon us to do is come up with solutions. But there are a lot of people in the room that care and want to try and find those solutions working together. And I've really been just made so much even more aware of that by working together with everyone in that group. Okay, with that, we're going to close that item and move to item 4.8, which is LAFCO and Municipal Service Review Update. So I'll hand it over to staff for this presentation.
Cool, and I'll hand it over to Ross to present this lengthy report that he put together.
Thanks, Jonathan. This was in response to a discussion from the board relatively recently in regards to the municipal service review process by LAFCO. And in order for the board to consider what it might want to do in terms of policy decisions to implement different programs and services under its authorized powers in Government Code 61250, it's probably important for the board to have an accounting of an important understanding and be able to ask questions about what the powers actually are. And if it is determined at some point that there's not enough authority in 61250, then what the process is for petitioning LAFCO for the activation of additional powers. So really what this memo is intended to be, is to outline the most important points in the various powers that are provided in 61250, and those fall under, generally speaking, two subdivisions: subdivision D as in dog, and subdivision G as in golf, laying out all the different powers that at various times since my firm became interim general district counsel and then district counsel, you've heard me say from time and time again, if it has to be grounded in one of the powers enumerated in 61250. So a quick side note on the municipal service review process itself. This whole discussion really came about via a conversation started by LAFCO in that they were going to carry out the municipal services review process. That conversation was started at the beginning of this year under a little bit of controversy that seems to have been or on its way to being resolved. And in conversations with the former executive director, Paul Hood, there was a tentative agreement to extend out the municipal service review process for the district, partly because of the fact that Measure R, which provides the utility user tax funding for the district's operations, did not really come online until 2018, and there really just wasn't enough time for the district board and staff to be able to reach its current operating capacity in terms of processing these different programs and putting together all of the information that the board needs to have in order to make these long-lasting and policy decisions. So the agreement with Mr. Hood was that the process would be extended out from 5 years from the district's formation. I think Jonathan and I both were under the impression, or at least I was, that it was 5 years from the passage of the tax. That since has been corrected, so it's not 5 years from the passage of the tax in 2018. It'd be from the creation of the district in 2017. I also was under the impression that this had already passed by the LAFCO board. Bill Dillon, who is acting as interim executive director with the passing of former executive director Paul Hood earlier this year, Mr. Dillon was kind enough to send us a letter to let us know that that process needed to be, or that the decision needed to be made by the LAFCO Commission, and that he would, upon our request, agendize that for the next meeting for that formal decision to be made. So we have certainly an agreement with Mr. Dillon, the interim executive director and legal counsel, to extend this deadline out, which is well within LAFCO's power to grant. We just need the formal decision by the LAFCO board. So if you look at the memorandum, we detail some of the background on page 1, discovering all of it, setting forth all this information. And then really the discussion focuses on what are the activated powers. And all the memo does, I'm not going to read through every section, but I go through and list each of the powers that are set forth in subsections D and G, and describe them in terms of what, activated power and whether they are being funded, which is later on in the memorandum. As much as it is important to consider what the district has the legal power and authority to do, it's also important to keep in mind what the district cannot do, which is to say its powers that are limited. And there are two explicitly stated limitations. This is in subsection B, which is on page 3, that the district does not have the power to do, and that it does not have the power to supplant the level of services provided by the County of Santa Barbara, the Isla Vista Recreation and Park District, UCSB, or any other service provider. This is important because a number of times throughout the history of this district, members of the public and board members want to look at policies that are further reaching, that as some members of the public point out, to try and get to the root of the problem. And certainly that would be beneficial and more efficient. The problem, as I have said many, many times, is that Isla Vista is not a city. And therefore, it does not have the same powers that an incorporated municipality has. It is a limited power special district that's governed by statute, not a political subdivision of the state like the county, or an incorporated municipal corporation like a city. So it cannot supplant, which is to say replace, any of the services that are provided by these other legal entities. That's subsection I in 61250. Importantly, the district does not have the power of eminent domain. That means it cannot condemn public property. It cannot condemn private property for a public purpose. So that is specifically excluded from the district's current powers. And it's important that if these are excluded from the district's powers now, that means it's not something that the district can petition to be activated later. This is the legal principle of specific trumps the general. There is a specific prohibition on the use of these powers, or a specific prohibition on the activation of these powers as set forth in 61250. So you would not be able to go around the intent of the legislature in the enactment of 61250 by Assembly Bill 3 and simply petition LAFCO to undo these. At least that's my position. I do a little bit of the statutory interpretation that would happen if we were petitioning the court, or if another a person disagreed with our interpretation about supplanting and what that would mean. And essentially, the way that the law, the case law, says that we figure out what words mean, which sounds kind of silly, but it actually happens a lot, is you start with the plain meaning as the statute provides it. And if there's any confusion, you try and go to the plain meaning of the words in context with all of the other words, and you try to harmonize the language in and amongst the different provisions, not to result in an absurdity. And if you need help finding out what a word means, then you go to dictionaries to provide that help. You do all of that before you go to look at things like legislative history, discussions, and letters that go back and forth in the process of the bill becoming law. So I simply include that in there to give an idea of what that might look like, a future discussion about what supplanting means. I do the same thing later on for the term supplementing. So after listing what the different activated powers are in 61250, we then go into activated powers currently in use. This is a presentation of the powers that are in use through the lens of the discussions that we've had at the staff level with LAFCO on what they look for in when they conduct the municipal service review process. And really, it comes down to two things for LAFCO that they're concerned about. Well, broadly speaking, it's one thing: it's money. But more specifically, is there money being programmed for a service or underneath an activated power, and is there a dedicated funding source for it? Why? Because it goes back to what the purpose of LAFCO is. It's to oversee the provision of services and programs within its jurisdiction, which is the County of Santa Barbara. They want to make sure that the money that is being spent judiciously and efficiently for the provision of these different services by all the different government agencies. That was born out of the reorganization of LAFCOs that happened in the early 2000s. So, in keeping in mind that LAFCO is really concerned with is money programmed for a program or a service, and is there a dedicated funding source? We turn to what programs or what powers are being used right now, and we list them out. The tenant mediation program is pretty straightforward. It's been funded for a while. It maintains sufficient funding when the contractor or a contractor has been available. There's a brief explanation of what it does. Supplemental police protection services have come primarily in two forms. One, the interpersonal violence investigator and the CSO safety stations when they were operating. Obviously, impacts of COVID are something that the board will need to consider, moving forward as it makes potentially adjustments to its policy decisions for these different programs and services. The next broad category is community facilities. We've been in negotiations with the county about leasing the two buildings in Embarcadero Del Mar, 970 and 976. We've been trying to get into the community center since last year to offer programs and services that were previously provided at the community room at 970. Obviously, all of that is in process. And the full extent of the board's policy decisions with respect to those buildings is kind of in limbo, both because of COVID and because of ongoing discussions, with the county. But currently, or at least at some point, there were recreation classes, there were after-school programs for district youth. There's a composting program that's headquartered out of the community center building. There are also temporary household support services at the community center. There's intergovernmental support and outreach program related to COVID-19, drive-throughs, COVID testing, and also access now virtually to district staff, office hours, and counter support. So the next broad power is sidewalks, lighting, gutters, and trees. This one I had to break out because the efforts of the district don't touch all of those specific areas. So sidewalks, lighting, gutters, and trees is broken down into sidewalks and gutters, and then lighting and then trees has been relegated to a power that is activated and services can be programmed, but as of yet, it doesn't appear that has really been implemented. So sidewalks and gutters primarily are receiving services through the agreement for beautification, upkeep via the contract with IV Beautiful and United Way. And the district continues to fund that partially, I believe, is a grant program. And any specific questions on administrative aspects or financial aspects, I'll have to refer to Jonathan and or Deborah. But at least in my review, there's a sidewalks and gutters right now are being touched by this program for beautification. Lighting, the district was very involved in conducting a lighting study and public survey following up with CSA 31, the county, and Edison for replacements and upgrades. I think the biggest impediment has been COVID since March. So the district had programmed and funded services related to lighting, and it certainly appears that sufficient funding exists to continue providing some services with respect to lighting, although the board is certainly able to consider how it might want to go about implementing additional changes or services in light of where things are with COVID. Graffiti abatement. Graffiti abatement obviously is important because as we reported last year with the consideration of the graffiti abatement program and implementing phase 1, which is a voluntary reporting process and authorization to enter onto private property to abate graffiti that's visible from the public right of way. It's unsightly for many residents, and but there are complications because of the overlapping jurisdiction between Santa Barbara County, CSA 31, and the district. So, a phased approach ended up being implemented by the board, partly in recognition of the overlapping jurisdiction, that the county at the time was not interested in resolving in any definitive way. So the district opted for the voluntary approach first, so as not to be in a hostile position with property owners and tenants, but rather to build a more collaborative model for trying to address what many see as a very important problem that needs attention. So graffiti abatement, again, primarily is accomplished through the Ivy Beautiful and United Way contract. There's the See-Click Fix app and the phase 1 of the multi-phase graffiti abatement program, the end result of which is to issue administrative citations and to carry out additional enforcement and to have some funding returned via administrative citations. Utility user tax, it's just listed there because that's a power, but obviously that was completed, if you will, via the approval of Measure R. Next section is activated powers not in use, and this goes to there is no funding currently set aside and or there is not a dedicated funding source for them, those programs, and or there's no identifiable program in existence now. That does not mean that there are not certain conceptual ideas or initial descriptions of future program ideas, but a lot of potential programs under this section were scuttled with COVID arriving at the beginning of the year. There was a lot of activity last year in terms of creating and setting the goals for a municipal advisory committee, which is a MAC. Also, there were some initial discussions about an area planning commission and what that would look like. There was an initial discussion of the parking district powers, which then went off into a somewhat long discussion by me because of what a parking district is and how it works under the Streets and Highways Code. And then activated powers not in use. This is where I included the provision on trees under subdivisions D1, large G, and G4. Not really any programs that I was able to identify where trees are the specific focus, but certainly they've come up with members of the community discussing issues with tree removal, something that they did not want to see, but also desire for maybe some tree trimming or replanting of trees. So again, some conversation on district trees, but no specific programming to show that the power is in use via the metric or the rubric that LAFCO is going to be using. And then finally, zoning code / building code enforcement. Other than some preliminary discussions with staff and members of the board leadership, zoning code, building code, and the local area planning commissions really tie into one another, and they're significant undertakings with a lot of different requirements. So next section is placing an activated power in use. Again, this is through the lens of what would LAFCO be looking at in terms of conducting a municipal services review and what can be shown by the district to show LAFCO that the money for programming and services is there, has been set aside, and also a dedicated funding source is available. So the first one is financing the operation of the MAC. And I provide wherever I can the specific provisions of law that talk about a program or talk about a service that give that way the board, staff, and any member of the public reading this can have follow-up. They have the sources for where this is coming from. And a MAC is something that is actually created by the County Board of Supervisors via resolution. What the power set forth in 61-250 is primarily, I would say exclusively focused on, is the financial aspects of the MAC, which is to say financial support for members of this committee or commission to engage with other public agencies, to engage with the county, and in certain circumstances to engage with private and state players, both within the county and without, to the extent that it's consistent with the jurisdiction that is ultimately set by the Board of Supervisors. So the financing the operation of the MAC and having a MAC stood up is something that would have to be accomplished in close coordination with the county Board of Supervisors, because ultimately they're the one that authorizes the creation. Financing the areas of an area planning commission. Very similarly, this is an area planning commission is created and authorized by the Board of Supervisors. And this will take time to accomplish, because it will mean a delegation of authority and power from the county to the area planning commission with respect to zoning and building and any other features or powers or areas of a planning and development law that the county sees fit to delegate to it. The model that we have that the district can look at is what happens in Montecito. They are the only other jurisdiction that has an area planning commission. So most likely we'd use that as a template for modeling the processes and procedures that would need to be followed in order for a local area planning commission to be stood up for Isla Vista. Again, close coordination with the Board of Supervisors and the county, because ultimately they're the one that authorizes its creation. Third bullet is parking district powers. This is the longest section, and it's the longest section because it is a broad set of powers that is referenced in 61250, but actually exists somewhere else in California law, namely the Streets and Highways Code. Again, I've provided the different sections under the Streets and Highways Code to provide very clear language, quoting where possible, that the different powers and limitations on what can be done with respect to parking. And it would be my intention that the board, once it gets into the place where it can activate and really use the parking district powers, is to have the board sit for a portion of its public meeting as the Isla Vista Community Parking District. Handle parking district matters consistent with the Streets and Highways Code, and then proceed to the remainder of their agenda for the other areas over their activated powers under 61250. Why? Because it's a complicated set of powers, and the level of public oversight is different. These laws have been in existence since the early 1940s. 1930s and certainly in the 1950s. A lot of these statutes have very little case law that guides their application. But the general principle is that there are mechanisms and procedures set up for public oversight, public participation with respect to the district IVCSD through its parking district powers, acquiring property and using that property and contracting for property to be used to alleviate the parking stresses that have been in Isla Vista since I was there in the mid-1990s. So I'm not going to go through each of them. I know everybody can read, but essentially it comes down to acquisition of land and property, being able to contract with private entities, and then a description of what I call the appurtenant or supporting powers that come along with, it's not just parking spaces, it's also sidewalks and gutters that are associated with access to those parking spaces. This necessarily includes parking structures. It includes improvements like grading and paving and draining and lighting and other things that are necessary and proper to carrying out this power. One thing I do want to note is that the parking district law does authorize the parking district formed pursuant to the Streets and Highways Code. It authorizes it to exercise eminent domain. Again, because that power is eliminated for IVCSD, it is my opinion that the eminent domain power set forth in the parking district law is not somehow reactivated, or that limitation in 61250 is circumvented. The specific statute for the creation of IVCSD says that it does not have the power, therefore these other sources for activating eminent domain do not apply. So that's Streets and Highways Code 35108 sub J. There's a long discussion about the Parking Place Commission, and this is the community involvement, what it does, how it's composed, how it meets, etc. But there's the public participation component for what the Parking Place Commission would be, what it would do, and how it would operate. Also, they're importantly in carrying out the various provisions of the Streets and Highways Code related to upkeep and maintenance, and ensuring that permits and rentals, etc., are paid correctly. Anybody working for the district under those powers are employees. There's a specific provision that their employees are required for the proper operation, management, and control of the parking district. Streets and Highways Code 35564, and that's on page 9. It's the second paragraph down, which says, because there is specific provision in the Streets and Highways Code that says that they have to be employees, that means we can't contract out. The district cannot have independent contractors for those specific positions and the jobs that they're supposed to carry out. And then there's funding in terms of setting permit fees and space rentals, etc. But the parking district law is detailed, and critically, it's old. So there's not a ton of law on its implementation. So it will take time to make sure that things are set up properly, and it will take time to develop the processes and procedures that are specified in the Streets and Highways Code for its successful operation. Moving on to small Roman numeral 4 district trees. I simply just brought this down from the prior provisions. Some type of funding source dedicated with respect to maintenance and planting or removal of trees. That would be sufficient for the MSR. And the final one is zoning code and building code enforcement. This is where I included the analysis for what supplementing means. And the zoning code and building code enforcement that is provided in 61250 is limited to 3 chapters in the county code. It's 10, I think, was it 10, 14, and 15, I believe they are. No, I'm sorry, that's not right. 10, 14, and 35. Those are building, zoning, and zoning and planning. So it's not the entire bucket of issues that a planning department would normally deal with if the public agency were a city. So those 3 county code chapters are necessarily going to limit what a local zoning code and building code enforcement program funded through the district would look like. It's going to be limited to issues for permits, conditional use permits. Now, I say it's limited, but in that limitation, there is a lot of power that can be invested in the zoning code and building code enforcement programs, but they're necessarily going to be connected to the local planning commission, because the local planning commission is going to be the body, the primary body that deals a lot with these issues. For like conditional use permits, whether to grant a variance in application of land use and planning law to the development of Isla Vista as a community, consistent with the county's general plan and any overlays or any special plans that apply to it, also within the broader context of the fact that the entire district sits in the coastal zone. So there a lot of complexity arises out of this power, and when you think about the fact that they are connected, code enforcement for zoning and planning is connected to the planning commission, local planning commission power, and it's also there is a heavy administrative component that will have to be provided for, because the district will need qualified planners and qualified people. Maybe that's through the county. With supplemental funding, or maybe that's with local people employed directly by the district. Either way, people with the requisite level of knowledge and skill in planning and development are going to be needed to implement the different administrative aspects, policies and procedures for land use planning. And then also you'll need competent code enforcement people who know what the planning and the zoning laws are to be able to do the enforcement aspect via administrative citations, civil compliance or criminal compliance, depending upon the type of violation. So those are large, beefy powers that come with a lot of different moving parts that will, depending upon the full scope, have a lot of money that needs to be programmed for them to be successful. If at the end of the day, the policy directions of the board are such that a decision is made that these activated powers just simply don't do it, that the desire is to get to the root of graffiti, not just address some of the problems with it, the surface problems. The idea is to get to the root of providing additional houseless support, whatever it might be. Then there's a process that's set forth in the LAFCO laws, and that are referenced in 61250 for activating additional powers. So anything that is not currently activated is what's known as a latent power. So that involves a petition to LAFCO to activate these latent powers, or to change an existing one, to expand the scope, to divest from a power if as a policy matter, the board decides that it's not using a policy, or I'm sorry, it's not using a power, and it really has no intention of doing so because of funding or because of policy priorities or whatever. The board can certainly make the decision to divest itself of a power, as well as activating a new latent power or changing an existing one. And that authorization in 61250 is at subdivision H. And then I've listed the provisions that apply to special districts in the LAFCO law and government code set out in sub F in this memo. And it just lays out the requirements. Again, I'm not going to go through everything in a boring detail ad nauseum, but I will point out that this is not as simple as filing a form. So, one of the things that we looked to in working with LAFCO was to find a way to cooperate with one another to reach our mutual goals where they overlapped. LAFCO making sure that we're spending the public's money wisely, and the district's desire to enact programs and services under its powers to help the community. And so we did not spend time going back and forth on the legal issues. We looked at how can we make sure that each organization's goals are met. So with that in mind, there was some initial discussion about, well, if LAFCO decides to deactivate a power, it's no big deal. Respectfully to LAFCO, I would disagree with that. It is a big deal. It's a big deal because there's a lot of workup that needs to go into any application to have a power activated. It doesn't matter if it was activated before and then deactivated and then reactivated, or if it's a brand new latent power that's never been used before. There are the proposal requirements are set forth, right there. It requires money, it requires time, it requires expertise, and it requires analysis on the provision of a service, regardless of its prior status is activated or not. So it's important as the board moves forward and looking at its powers under 61250 or the other laws like the parking district law in making its policy decisions, that it keeps in mind that LAFCO is going to be looking at, is there money set forth for it, and is that a dedicated funding source? If it's a program or service, is it recovering some of the money back through fees or some other way to make sure that this isn't just one-off money that's going to disappear after 18 months? Is there looking at, is there a level of service that's being provided? Is it being provided to the area that's serviced by the local government agency, and is it being done in a way that's an efficient use of the public's money? So that's the process for, it's laid out right there for petitioning. There are notice requirements. It happens at a public hearing. And I've laid out the different requirements that go into the proposal to either activate a latent power, change an existing power, or to divest of a power. So the time frame for the MSR, I believe, Jonathan, this is the correct revised year is 2024. And during that time for the district to activate and to set forth programs and services and program money and establish funding sources, that is not a long time horizon, because there are many moving parts for some of these powers, especially where they are interrelated and interlocking, and where the conversations with the county have to occur in order for an approval to be provided, an authorization to be provided, or simply just the nuts and bolts of how something is going to work needs to be figured out. This is probably the most I've ever spoken on any item in quite some time. I'm happy to answer questions. I'm at your disposal.
Thank you, Ross, for that lengthy but very necessary and important report. I saw a hand from Director Freeman. I'll go over to you.
One maybe question, maybe clarification I have is that, so you listed the things that our district can't do, like our carve-outs and things that were prevented in some sense from doing. I just want to verify that this wasn't missed, or maybe it was interpreted differently by us. There's like a subsection, or subparagraph H. I'm actually not certain, because I now realize I just copied and pasted into my notes here as simply beginning with H. Following the creation of the district may petition the Santa Barbara Local Agency Information Commission pursuant to the Cortez-Knox-Fitchburg Local Government Reorganization Act to exercise new or different functions or classes of services listed in section 61-100, except those powers specified in subdivisions E and F of that section, in addition to those functions or services that were authorized by the time the district was created. And so these were the powers that are related to the Isla Vista Recreation and Park District. And so that was the carve out that was applied there. And so it's verifying that, was that just missed, or is it maybe I'm misinterpreting it differently, or?
No, I don't think that I didn't call it out specifically because there wasn't anything that needed to be discussed as to those specific provisions that were not already included in the analysis and discussion in some other part. And really, when it comes to Ivy Park and Rec, it's not to replace the service that they provide. Similar with not replacing any service provided by CSA 31 or the county or any other public agency that's providing some type of a local governmental service.
So I also have a question about the district trees. So maybe I had been crazy for always thinking this, but I'd always assumed that the not that one, build text, here we go, that the items, like that the individual paragraphs stood as individual powers. So for example, we have this power, well, not just for example, for the specific, we have this power: acquire, construct, improve, and maintain sidewalks, lighting, gutters, and trees to supplement the level of service already provided by either the county or yada, yada, yada. I was under the impression that as long as we were doing things in that section, that was considered to be that power, not that anyone was ever going to try to be like, well, you're doing sidewalks, but not gutters. Did you do any trees or something along those lines? Like, do we really have a concern about them plucking things like that?
Well, I think there are two parts to your question. One, should we be parsing out the language to that degree? And I think my response to that is that the number of powers that are enumerated as latent powers in Government Code 61,000, that lists all the powers that are available as latent powers for a community services district, and the list is lengthy. So, they didn't list everything, but they really gave it their best shot in trying to list as many things as possible. I approach this as, if the policy goals of the board are to have as many of these powers programmed in a way that the LAFCO will be satisfied in their municipal services review that everything the district is doing is copacetic and it's consistent with their oversight, then you will want to treat these as separate powers. That's why I divided it up this way. Certainly an argument can be made that if it is listed as one subdivision, it is one power. My concern with that interpretation is that trees, lighting, gutters and sidewalks are different types of public property and different types of public facilities, and that the obligations that spring forth from them are different. Therefore, it's very likely that they would be considered separate sub-powers underneath that one subdivision. And so, for example, gutters and sidewalks, generally speaking, go together more than you necessarily might think for sidewalks and lighting. They're not necessarily completely distinct, though, obviously, but sometimes you have a lighting mast that is set into the sidewalk. You will have a tree that is pushing up panels of a sidewalk or affecting the gutter line, whatever it happens to be. So yes, they're definitely interrelated, but for purposes of the MSR, I think that policy should be made on the assumption that they will be considered to be separate.
Fair enough. And so for what it's worth, I am certainly very excited about the idea of us looking at trees. So something else I wanted to do is to provide. So there was apparently some confusion with relation to what had been going on timeline-wise with LAFCO, and so I just wanted to report from the being at and in fact on those meetings that the agenda item, which had been about the Isla Vista Community Service District at the 2 meetings ago, was not about this like the MSR timing. It was about a response to the letter that we sent them. So we had all of our discussions, and that resulted in us having you, Ross, draft a letter to Local Agency Information Commission with respect to our position on that we didn't feel that they were able to do what they were able to do, and then they had they, as in also now us, had drafted Will Dillon draft a letter in response, but because that letter was something you might experience in closed session at LAFCO, that was a confidential LAFCO item that then had to be brought to the LAFCO board in order to decide whether the LAFCO board was willing to send that letter to the Isla Vista Community Service District. So we did vote yes at LAFCO 2 meetings ago to send that letter to IVCSD. Jonathan forwarded it to all of us and mentioned in the email that we would have an agenda item about it, although I'm not remembering us actually having an agenda item to explicitly discuss the response from LAFCO to our legal opinion and analysis. But now the idea is that we are then regrouping and doing all these things, and then at the next LAFCO meeting, or I haven't gotten the agenda yet, or potentially the one afterwards, that this is going to come back to LAFCO, and then the LAFCO board will be making a decision about what the timing on the MSR will be for Isla Vista. So.
Right, exactly right, and that those specific details on the timing and what was approved and what was not approved is something that Mr. Dillon's letter from Monday was very kind to point out. That the next step is while he intends to recommend the agreement that was reached initially with Mr. Hood, and then in further conversations with Bill Dillon, myself, and Jonathan, his recommendation is certainly going to be to push out the MSR review process to give the district more time to put all these various measures in place. But that decision has not yet been made, but will be made at a future LAFCO meeting. So that's important clarification, Director Freeman, and thank you very much for making it.
And we responded to his email confirming our want to have this be at the next meeting on the agenda. So, because he asked, you want me to do this at the next meeting? We said yes.
I see Director Thurl has been patiently waiting. Go to you, George.
Yeah, real quick. Jay, I'm not as worried about trees, mostly because everybody and their brother is going to be planting trees in Isla Vista, and whether we're able to jump in there or not. I am really, really worried that the MAC/Planning Commission is going to get away from us. And during those meetings that we were every week, or it seemed like every day, to form this district, the MAC was a huge item of community concern. So and also, Ross, I just want to tell you, this is great work. This is really, really, really good work, and it's a foundation, I think, for us to to really start to focus in on these big issues. I don't know what we're going to do about parking. My thought would be is that in early 2023 we hire consultants to come up with a parking plan for us. But I think we've got to get going on the MAC, and so I'd really like to urge the board to set some kind of internal timetable for getting moving on it with some timelines and goals and dates to get going on that. Because COVID or not, I think we can move on a MAC. So thank you. Okay, you and I will be out there planting trees next weekend.
Thank you for that, Director Thurlow. Hope to see you out there. Any other board feedback? I think I see Bob.
Let me get on.
You might be muted.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There you go. So when I look at these, the one thing I hear from Ross's presentation are these are the activated powers not in use are difficult, will take a long time, will take a lot of support for an agreement for the county, and will be really expensive. And just let me name two. On the parking district powers, you know, the county failed to put in a parking program. It got turned down by the Coastal Commission. And Surfrider was really big about, you know, we're talking about a parking district in the coastal zone. So it's even harder to put in a parking district. Then, you know, for the planning of Isla Vista, we as the redevelopment agency spent $3.6 million doing a general plan for Isla Vista, and it's still sitting in someone's desk because it also failed. And therefore, you know, that was a huge plan with lots of activity done. So I just want to I think we as a board need to really think about these activated powers. And number one, can we afford them? Can we get the county's cooperation? Do they really want us to be involved in them? And you know, maybe we're fighting a losing cause. That yes, we would really like some of these powers. We would like them to be successful. The question is the county hasn't been successful on this stuff, and I worry a little bit of, can we take that on and be successful? So that's just, I really hear Ross, what he's saying is this stuff is really hard. And I haven't heard the county say, yes, we want you to run a MAC. I haven't heard the county to say, I've heard him say, we don't think you should do a planning commission in Isla Vista. I just know they failed at parking, and I've even heard George say, oh, don't touch parking. And I played golf with the guy that did the last parking study, and he started laughing. He goes, you try parking, you're going to fail. And so I just don't know. I think we need to really look at the complexities of these powers and say, can we really embark on them? And maybe there's some low-hanging fruit that we could. George is bringing up the operations of a MAC. I think we can afford that. It's just, does the county want us to do it? And so that's just where I am on some of this stuff.
Well, thanks for that feedback. I'll just jump in and say, echo the comments about how this report is very thorough, and I really appreciate your work in putting it together, Ross. I think if there's one takeaway that I have, it's not so much as you know, talking about the powers that are activated and not activated. And I think we've had a lot of discussions in that vein over the last couple of years. It's more about an appreciation for the fact that once we start down the path of putting together some of these programs that meet those services that are activated but not in use, it is going to take a substantial amount of time, a substantial amount of effort, and a substantial amount of this district's resources to be able to accomplish those goals. And so I'm happy to see that I think working with LAFCO, we've been able to correctly communicate that and in delaying the MSR until 2024. And I do think that we have come a long way from the beginning when we sort of had some disagreements on the language of what LAFCO, the purpose of the municipal service review would be. So I would just continue to hope going forward that we're all on the same page about what the LAFCO law authorizes LAFCO to do, and making sure there's not foregone conclusions embedded in a municipal service review process. I think that'll just be really important. So with that, I don't really have any other feedback on this report. I'm not sure if other board members do, but I think that it was a really helpful informational item. George?
Yeah, real quick. Bob, I totally agree with you with parking. And the more I look at it, the more I begin to feel like parking in Isla Vista may have to be solved by the marketplace and not by government action. On the other hand, I do feel like we should move ahead. I would like to make a motion that says that we ask the staff in the next couple of weeks, not right away, but the next couple of weeks, to kind of draft in working with Ross and in conversations with Joan Hartman's office, to draft sort of a business plan for an MAC. So we'll trade you parking for a MAC.
Ethan here. Ross, thank you so much for the great overview. If I was the first speaker, I was going to joke and ask you to repeat the presentation, but that was just so good, so good. And I actually was most excited by the parking district part of it. And when I think about the long-term vision of parking in Isla Vista, my top concern really is how we can get a better balance to reflect the future transportation needs and the pedestrian, bicycle, skateboard friendly community that we have. So I still am going to want to look in the coming years at what possibilities we do have with improving our parking situation. But other than that, I think there's a lot of important information here for us to dig deeper into. So thank you for providing this.
Is there any other board comments on this item? Bob?
I just want to also, chime in that Ross did a really good job on this, and I think it really is well laid out. And this is going in my permanent file because we'll come back to it to help read the law.
I could not agree more. It is a very comprehensive interpretation, and I think, as Ross alluded to in his report, encapsulates a lot of the discussions that we've had over the last couple of years, bouncing ideas off of each other and off of Ross, saying, could we do this? What does the law say about this? What if we came at it from this angle? So I'm really glad that we've had this, and thanks again for all the work that you do for us, Ross.
Can I ask for a second on my motion?
So is that I will second it with the one question that, are we even really supposed to be talking about enacting services today?
I don't think that the agenda is about a MAC. I think it's about LAFCO and this informational item report. But if you want to bring that back on a future agenda, Director Thurlow, you're welcome to make that request.
That's fine. You're gonna foist me on my own petard. Okay, I'm foisted. I'll ask Jonathan to put that on the agenda, and the item is to propose a timeline and series of steps to begin to move forward on implementation of a MAC.
It's on the list for next week.
No, you can. I mean, I just don't want this. I feel like Ross has sort of laid out a timeline here for us. And I worry that, it's going to get lost in everything else that's going on, COVID, policing, and just the day in, day out. So I really think I hear him saying you need to get going on some of this stuff, or you need to cut it loose.
Thanks for that, Director. Director Geis?
Yeah, it seems to me we should, just like we did last year, we had that long-term planning session and, how we were going to implement services. And I thought we did a great job on that. It was a special meeting and we took public input, but I think we should be taking this memo and integrating it into that long-term planning process and a discussion amongst our board of, just like George said, can we have a discussion and say, okay, we're going to cut this one loose because we can't do it. We can't afford it. The county doesn't want us to do it. And so I think we would do well to take this into a planning process and say, in the bigger picture, how would we get it done? That's just what my thoughts are.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
Bob, I think you're completely right. And I know when I think about this and other issues, I always go back to our strategic plan that we have in place for how we're going to implement these services and how we're going to research and approach these new frontiers too. So with that,
I think that planning process, if we get that into our long-term planning document, some of these issues, it'll also make a good case to LAFCO that, hey, we're moving on this stuff. This is our plan, or we've considered it and make it a latent power. We're not going to do it. So.
Well, with that, I think we'll wrap up discussion on this. I don't know if there's a motion that we need on this item at all. Don't believe so. I will actually pause for a moment and open up public comment if there are any members of the public that wish to speak on this item.
Yes. Can you hear me? This is Peter Initial, a taxpayer. I disagree with the quality of the report. The conclusion, section 3, line 1 is false. The reason that I could probably tear it to pieces elsewhere. However, I want to talk about graffiti abatement. I want to know why you are not hiring a professional to perform graffiti abatement in Isla Vista. Your app affirms repeatedly that whatever contractor you engaged is not trained or equipped to deal with a problem. Whoever you have managing this contractor is not following up, not contacting property owners, not doing anything. Graffiti abatement requires a manager and board oversight. That takes me to what appears to be a $84,000 contract with the same entity that is currently not doing the job. Why was this contract not put out to bid? This community, I pay the tax dollars. You are dispensing those 84,000 tax dollars. This community should have the opportunity to bid on any and all jobs. Lastly, when it comes to parking, clearly those that don't think we can have a program don't live here. That's it.
Thank you for your comments. I do want to address one thing. I believe our program, as far as graffiti abatement, did over the last year close over 600 requests. So I just want to address that because I think that that's a false statement. Okay, so back to the board. Any other board comments on this report about LAFCO? All right. Well, with that, we'll receive and file the report. And thank you again, Ross, for your energy put into this. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to working, continuing to work collaboratively with LAFCO as we move forward.
My pleasure.
All right. We're going to move to item 5, which is reports. And we'll start from reports from members of the board. Any board members have reports? All right. With that, the only thing that I was going to report on was, let's see, where is it? I actually don't have it with me, so I'll pass on this for now. And we'll go to reports from committees. Do we have any committee reports today? All right. Report from council.
One brief item. This regards AB 992. At various times since more and more of the people's business is conducted online and the prevalence of social media and trying to balance the restrictions in the Brown Act and making decisions outside of a public meeting versus having constituents communicate with their elected officials. A lot of discussion back and forth, which is somewhat culminated in AB 992. It will be effective. It was passed by both houses of the state legislature and signed by the governor, effective January 1st, 2021, for a period of 5 years, that essentially lays out some guidelines for what elected officials can and cannot do with respect to the use of social media and within the broader context of the Brown Act. So basically, how elected officials can use social media platforms to engage with their constituencies and to engage with the public at large without running afoul of Brown Act, where public meetings are the forum for discussing the public's business. That will be coming into effect the beginning of January coming up. So interesting little tidbit, but I won't belabor the point. It's certainly available on the state legislature's website. And if any questions arise from the board, I'm happy to provide a more detailed analysis of what the bill does and some of the guidelines that it provides for using social media to converse with the public. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ross. All right, we'll now move to 5.4, report from general manager.
Great. Oh, I'm not on mute. So the first report I have is that the mediation program, I mentioned this a little bit during the COVID item, but our mediator, Sayer, has delivered and almost finalized a compact for roommates and housemates to use, and that's going to be available for free for the public to use on our website. And if they needed more assistance negotiating their house compact, we will be able to, provide mediation services like always to sign the contract and to resolve any issues that come out of it for those tenants. So that's exciting, and we're going to be making an announcement of it once it's ready. Our annual audit is underway, almost done. It went by pretty fast this year between pretty much 2 board meetings. We're not done yet. There's still a couple, they're backed up a lot with other clients. So we are mostly done, but we're waiting on a couple more things from them and waiting on more requests they might have, but it's going well so far. It was, interesting doing that in a remote way instead of usually in person when we can talk for a while in person. COVID coordination took up, I'd say, the majority of my time since the last board meeting. Hopefully it's winding down. And we have a good system now to help the other, stakeholders and responders to respond appropriately in IVCSD. So hopefully the response, coordinating the response will slow down and we can focus more on outreach. The Compost Collective has a new administrative policy to operate the program. It's going to be posted on the website, and we're still working out the final details. But it basically, you know, as we start the fall and the service in the fall, we want to just have some accountability for people who are using the program to make sure that they are actually using it and not just signing up and taking up a spot when someone else could be on there. And we're also working out agreements to have compost delivered at the churches like we have had, and still working on that partnership with IVRPD. And hopefully the next board meeting will finally have something to show the board. The homelessness outreach that the board voted on a couple meetings ago, how that has been playing out at this point is we're working with Emily Allen from United Way and Kimberly Kiefer at Ivy Rec and Parks to look at how we can expand Ivy Beautiful into the parks to provide better access to restrooms and do peer outreach at the same time. So that's the idea of where that motion is kind of going with the groups that we can discuss this with. So I'll let you know where that goes by the next October meeting, I think. And then the last couple thing is the internship, our public policy internship applications will be going out pretty soon. Deborah is finalizing the job description for that. And we have a library meeting this Friday to start talking about how the library actions that we supported back in April a million years ago are going to start being implemented now. And that's it.
Thank you for that report, Jonathan. Okay, with that, we've reached the end of the agenda. Our next meeting will take place on October 13th at 6 p.m. right here on Zoom. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I second.
All right, motion made by Bertrand and seconded by Freeman. Any public comment? Any more board discussion? Jonathan, go ahead and call the roll.
Right on. Director Brandt?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes.
Bertrand?
Yes.
Hedges?
Yes.
Thurlow?
Yes.
Geis?
Yes.
Nguyen?
Yes.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We will see you on the 13th.
See you.